In the icy silence of Alaska's rugged expanse, a sound shattered the tranquility. Not the roar of a jet engine, but something far more sinister. A towering plume of smoke twisted upward into the slate-gray sky as a fiery inferno consumed a massive cargo aircraft. Seconds before the explosion, another plane, fully loaded with passengers, waited unknowingly on a nearby taxiway, separated by mere feet from catastrophe. Within minutes, Anchorage's Ted Stevens International Airport, one of the world's busiest cargo hubs, went dark. Flights were grounded, roads blocked, communications jammed. What exactly happened on that frozen runway? Why did this airport, critical to U.S. commerce and defense, go into full shutdown mode? And more importantly, what terrifying truth did investigators uncover in the wreckage? Stay with us, because what you're about to discover goes far beyond aviation. It touches geopolitics, climate, and the very limits of modern infrastructure. It all began like any other cold Alaskan morning. Freezing fog hung low over the tarmac, engines purred in the distance, and the ground crew moved with the precision of seasoned professionals. Anchorage's Ted Stevens International Airport, the unassuming titan of Arctic aviation, was operating normally. But at exactly 7:42 a.m., a routine takeoff turned into a nightmare. A cargo jet, operated by a major international freight carrier, barreled down runway 15, one of the longest in North America. Moments after reaching rotation speed, disaster struck. Eyewitnesses described the plane violently veering to the left, as if jerked by an invisible force. In seconds, the aircraft's landing gear collapsed. Skidding sideways, its wing clipped a fuel truck still within the danger zone, igniting an explosion so intense that even reinforced glass in nearby towers shattered from the blast. The fireball engulfed the aircraft's front section, sending flames hundreds of feet into the air. But what made this moment so chilling was what almost happened next. Parked just 100 feet away was a fully loaded passenger plane, waiting for clearance. One more second, one more meter, and we wouldn't be talking about an isolated accident. We'd be talking about the deadliest aviation disaster in U.S. history. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Anchorage, a linchpin in global cargo logistics, went completely offline. Flights were rerouted to Fairbanks, Seattle, and even Canada. But unlike a typical airport, Anchorage isn't just another stop on a map. It's the stopover for flights between Asia and the U.S. mainland. Without it, the flow of vital goods collapsed. Hospitals in remote Alaskan villages reported delayed medicine deliveries. Tech factories in California saw critical components arrive days late. E-commerce giants scrambled to find alternative routes as next-day deliveries turned into next-week headaches. Every minute of shutdown cost millions. Every hour without cargo crippled the supply chain further, and the uncertainty only deepened. Investigators didn't just see a wreck, they saw a systems failure. Was it mechanical, infrastructure fatigue, a cold weather flaw missed by inspection crews? Theories ran wild as engineers and federal agencies descended on the runway. What they would find would call into question everything we thought we knew about aviation safety in extreme environments. Beneath the flames and frozen debris, a more sinister reality began to emerge. Alaska's aviation infrastructure, thought to be among the most resilient on Earth, might be far more vulnerable than anyone imagined. As black box recordings revealed that the crew had mere seconds between the first warning and the explosion, another layer unfolded. The runway itself had been inspected just days prior. So what went wrong? Investigators found that freeze-thaw cycles had likely caused microfractures in the tarmac, invisible to the naked eye but deadly under pressure. The intense cold had also compromised hydraulic systems that typically pass safety checks in warmer climates. Emergency crews, working in sub-zero conditions, found that even fire suppression chemicals had frozen mid-spray, complicating the containment effort. It wasn't just one failure. It was dozens of small weaknesses compounding in perfect, deadly synchronicity. And as days passed with the airport still sealed, the U.S. government was forced to confront a chilling truth. Our cold region transportation hubs are dangerously unprepared for the climate instability we now face. But this wasn't just about planes and packages. Anchorage, as it turns out, is also a vital military corridor. Its location makes it a strategic waypoint for U.S. surveillance defense logistics and trans-Pacific military operations. With it offline, refueling missions were rerouted, defense timelines stretched, and military planners sounded the alarm. What if this wasn't an accident? What if next time it is sabotage, cyber, or otherwise? The parallels between this real-world mechanical failure and a hypothetical infrastructure attack were impossible to ignore. National security experts began emergency briefings in Washington, while insurers re-evaluated their entire Arctic risk models. Climate scientists pointed to changing weather patterns and worsening permafrost instability. Economists calculated the cost of a single airport shutdown rippling across entire industries. And throughout Alaska, local communities were left stranded, supplies delayed, medicines unavailable, prices surging. Anchorage's collapse had exposed a hidden fragility, the terrifying possibility that a single point of failure in a remote location could bring entire systems to their knees. And with no definitive cause confirmed, the fear lingered. What if it happens again? While news headlines focused on the flaming aircraft and logistical nightmares, something far more insidious was quietly unfolding behind the scenes: the human cost. Anchorage isn't just a waypoint for cargo, it's a lifeline for remote Alaskan communities. Within 24 hours of the shutdown, smaller towns like Bethel, Nome, and Barrow began to feel the consequences. Planes carrying essential goods, fuel, food, life-saving medical equipment never arrived. Clinics reported shortages of insulin. Parents scrambled to find baby formula. Some villages had enough supplies for only 3 days, and the clock was ticking. Yet there was no way out. Icy roads were impassable, ferries weren't running, and bush planes couldn't fly in the hazardous conditions. For many, this wasn't just an inconvenience, it was survival. Meanwhile, the federal response was sluggish. It was as if the vastness of Alaska once again rendered its residents invisible. And that silence only amplified the fear. How fragile is modern life when a single accident can paralyze an entire region? Attention quickly turned to the aircraft itself. Built 2 decades ago, the cargo jet had logged tens of thousands of flight hours. While the airline claimed it passed routine inspections, retired engineers began raising red flags. Whistleblower reports from former ground crews revealed that certain maintenance procedures were routinely skipped in order to meet tight delivery schedules. Small warning signs, hydraulic lag, landing gear pressure inconsistencies, cabin vibration during taxiing, had allegedly been dismissed. But what shocked investigators the most was a digital maintenance log that had been overwritten 2 days before the crash, allegedly to clear up backlog. Was this a clerical error or a cover-up? Boeing's design was not at fault, but the human layer of oversight, the invisible network of engineers, mechanics, and managers, might have been. For an airline racing against global delivery demands, a few delayed flights could mean millions lost. But as Flight 4782 lay in ruins, charred and frozen in place, it was now clear. What was ignored for the sake of profit may have turned into a catastrophe no one could afford. As cleanup crews cleared the twisted remains of the aircraft and blackened fuel truck, scientists quietly arrived at a different scene: the soil. Beneath the tarmac, permafrost had begun to thaw, years ahead of predictions. This wasn't just a fluke. Satellite thermal imaging showed that the ground beneath Anchorage was shifting, collapsing, and destabilizing in places it once held firm. In other words, the airport was literally sinking. Experts from the University of Alaska warned that the region's infrastructure had been built atop frozen time bombs. And as climate change accelerated, these time bombs were now ticking faster. The runway failure may not have started with a wheel or a pilot. It may have begun years ago, deep underground, when temperatures first crept a few degrees above normal. The terrifying thought? Every Arctic runway, fuel line, and foundation could be next. What looked like a tragic accident might have actually been the first visible collapse in a system built on melting ground. Despite the magnitude of the shutdown, the FAA's public response was strikingly minimal. A brief statement cited ongoing investigations and safety priorities, but behind closed doors, something much bigger was unfolding. Emergency meetings were held with major cargo operators, Department of Defense officials, and foreign aviation regulators. Leaked documents revealed that multiple Arctic runway inspections across North America were suddenly fast-tracked. Internal emails showed concern over runway standards that hadn't been updated in over a decade. Even more alarming, U.S. allies in Europe and Asia began requesting updated risk assessments for transpolar flight paths. Suddenly, Anchorage wasn't just a local incident. It was a global case study in what happens when aviation meets a warming planet. Pilots began questioning the integrity of runways in Greenland, Siberia, and even northern Canada. The FAA's silence wasn't a cover-up. It was a delay tactic. Because what they now faced wasn't a simple mechanical investigation. It was the unraveling of aviation certainty in the Arctic age. What happened that morning in Anchorage wasn't just an aviation accident. It was a moment of revelation, a blinding flash of fire and smoke that illuminated all the cracks beneath the surface. From outdated infrastructure straining under a changing climate, to maintenance shortcuts masked by corporate silence, to a cargo industry stretched to the breaking point, it all converged in one terrifying instant. An airport that connects continents was paralyzed not by war nor terrorism, but by a system so optimized that it forgot to brace for failure. And in doing so, it exposed just how close we are, at any given moment, to the collapse of things we thought were unshakable. But perhaps the most chilling truth isn't what failed that day, but what almost failed. Just feet away from the explosion sat a passenger jet, its engines idling, its cabin full of innocent lives. 1 second, one gear shift, one gust of wind. And this video would be telling a very different story. If this was a warning, from nature, from negligence, from the sheer complexity of modern systems, the question now isn't if we'll listen. It's whether we'll act before the next warning becomes a headline soaked in tragedy. If this story opened your eyes to the fragile threads holding our modern world together, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share this video, and let's spark the conversation that regulators, corporations, and officials have been avoiding. Drop a comment. Do you trust today's infrastructure to handle tomorrow's risks? And if you want more deep dive stories that reveal what's really happening behind the news, subscribe now. Because here we don't just report events, we uncover the truths hidden in plain sight.